I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I thought I had seen the worst of human greed. But standing there, under the gray, weeping sky of the cemetery, I realized I hadn't seen anything yet. My father-in-law, Arthur, was being lowered into the ground. He was the only person who had ever truly treated me like a daughter. For 5 years, I was his hands, his feet, and his voice. I stayed by his side through every hospital visit, every midnight fever, and every painful breath. And where was his wife? Where was Grella, my mother-in-law? She was in Paris. She was in Milan. She was finding herself in the boutiques of Rome while her husband's lungs were failing him. But today, she was back. She wasn't crying. Behind her designer veil, I saw it, a smirk, a tiny, disgusting curl of her lips as the dirt hit the casket. She wasn't mourning a husband, she was celebrating payday. As we walked back to the cars, she leaned close to me. Her perfume was suffocating, expensive, floral, and cold. "I hope you enjoyed your stay in my house, Sarah," she whispered, "because by tomorrow morning, you're nothing but a memory in this family." I didn't know it then, but Arthur had a plan that hinged on a single word. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand what the last 5 years looked like. When I married her son, Mark, I thought I was joining a family. But Mark passed away in a tragic accident only a year after our wedding. I was devastated. I had no one. Arthur, Mark's father, was the one who pulled me out of the dark. He told me I was still his daughter. And when Arthur's health began to decline shortly after, Greta, his wife of 30 years, decided she couldn't handle the stress of a sick room. She hired a string of nurses, but she treated them so poorly they all quit within a week. That's when I stepped in. I moved into the guest wing of their estate. I learned how to manage oxygen tanks. I learned the schedules for 14 different medications. Arthur was a man of immense wealth. He had built a real estate empire from nothing. But in that sick room, he was just a man who wanted to hear stories about his son. We spent thousands of hours talking. He saw Greta for who she was, a woman who married him for the prestige and stayed for the credit cards. "Sarah," he told me once, his voice a raspy whisper, "greed is a slow poison. It eats the soul until there's nothing left but a shell. Don't ever let it take you." I didn't care about the money. I had a small job I did remotely, enough to keep myself going. I did it because I loved him. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Greta, meanwhile, would call once a month from a yacht or a five-star hotel. "Is he dead yet?" She wouldn't say it directly, but she would ask about the arrangements and the estate status. She was waiting. She was a vulture circling a dying lion. The moment Arthur's heart stopped, the vulture landed. I was the one holding his hand. I was the one who called the ambulance, even though I knew it was too late. I was the one who sat in the hospital hallway for 6 hours, alone. Greta arrived 3 days later, just in time to pick out the most expensive casket money could buy, using Arthur's business account, of course. She didn't ask me how I was. She didn't ask about Arthur's final moments. Instead, she walked into the estate and started putting Post-it notes on the furniture. "This Ming vase is going to my sister," she told me, not even looking up from her notebook. "The piano is being auctioned, and this wing of the house, I'm turning it into a walk-in closet for my furs." I stood in the doorway exhausted, my eyes red from crying. "Greta, Arthur just passed. Can we at least wait until after the service to talk about furniture?" She turned to me, her eyes like ice. "The service is a formality, Sarah. This house is mine. The accounts are mine. You were a convenient live-in nurse, and I thank you for saving me the expense of a professional. But the family is now just me. You're an outsider, an interloper." She stepped closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor Arthur had polished himself. I've already spoken to the lawyers. There's a will from 10 years ago. It leaves everything to the surviving spouse. That's me. So, I'll give you until Friday. Pack your things and leave quietly, or I'll have security toss your suitcases into the driveway. Friday came faster than I could process. I had spent the last few days in a daze, packing my life into cardboard boxes. I had nowhere to go. My parents were gone, and I had spent my savings on extra comforts for Arthur that the insurance wouldn't cover. Special pillows, organic foods, things to make his last days easier. It started to rain, a cold, biting autumn rain. I was struggling to carry a heavy box of books to my old sedan when I saw a moving truck pull up. But it wasn't for me. It was for Greta's new furniture. She stood on the porch, a glass of champagne in her hand, watching me struggle in the mud. "You missed a spot in the kitchen, by the way," she called out, her voice dripping with venom. There was some dust under the cabinet. I'd expect better from a daughter. One of the movers accidentally bumped into my box, sending my belongings spilling into a puddle. My photos of Mark, my journals, my clothes, all soaked in muddy water. I looked up at Greta. "How can you be this cruel? Arthur loved you once. He would be ashamed of you." She laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. "Arthur was a sentimental old fool. He worked his whole life so I could live like this. He's gone now, Sarah. His opinions don't matter. Only his signature matters. And that signature is on a document that says, 'I win.'" She waved her hand dismissively. "Get off my property. Now." I drove away in tears, checking into a cheap, flickering light motel on the edge of town. I felt defeated. I felt like the last 5 years of my life had been erased by a woman who hadn't even known her husband's middle name. But then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Sarah Woods, this is the office of Marcus Sterling, senior partner at Sterling and Associates. We require your presence tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the formal reading of the estate of Arthur Vance. Attendance is mandatory." I frowned. Greta had said the will was already settled. What was this? The next morning, I arrived at the Sterling and Associates building. It was a towering glass structure in the heart of the city, the kind of place where billion-dollar deals are signed and lives are changed. I was wearing my only clean suit, trying to hide the fact that I had slept in a motel. When I entered the conference room, Greta was already there. She was draped in black silk, looking like she was attending a fashion show rather than a legal meeting. She was flanked by 2 young, aggressive-looking lawyers of her own. "What is she doing here?" Greta snapped the moment I walked in. "I told you, Sterling, she's not part of this. I have the 2015 will right here." Marcus Sterling was an older man with white hair and eyes that looked like they had seen everything. He didn't even look at Greta's lawyers. He just gestured for me to sit down. "Please, Sarah, sit. We have a lot to discuss." Greta slammed her hand on the mahogany table. "There is nothing to discuss. My husband left everything to me. I am the widow. I am the sole heir. This girl is just a former employee who overstayed her welcome." Mr. Sterling slowly put on his glasses. He opened a thick leather folder. "You are correct, Greta," he said calmly. "There was indeed a will written in 2015 that named you as the primary beneficiary. However," he paused, looking directly at Greta, "Arthur visited me 6 months ago. He was quite lucid. He was also quite observant. He made a few changes." Greta scoffed. "Changes? He was on heavy medication. He didn't know what he was doing. I'll have any changes thrown out of court before the ink is dry." "I assure you," Mr. Sterling replied, "the medical evaluations conducted that day prove he was in perfect mental health. He also recorded a video statement. Would you like to see it?" The room went dark, and a screen lowered from the ceiling. Suddenly, there was Arthur. He looked frail, sitting in his favorite armchair in the library, but his eyes were sharp. He looked directly into the camera. "If you're watching this," Arthur's voice filled the room, "it means I finally found the peace I've been looking for. And it means Greta is likely sitting in a room right now, wondering how much she can sell my legacy for." Greta turned pale. Her lawyers shifted uncomfortably. "Greta," Arthur continued, "I spent 30 years providing for you. I gave you the world, and in return, when I needed you most, you gave me a postcard from Paris. You thought I didn't see the bills? You thought I didn't know you were draining the business accounts to fund a lifestyle for yourself and your friends while I was struggling to breathe?" His gaze shifted, softened. "And then there's Sarah. Sarah, you gave up your youth to take care of an old man who wasn't even your blood. You stayed when everyone else left. You showed me what family actually means." Arthur leaned forward. "Greta, you always said you stayed with me for the sanctity of marriage. Well, I decided to honor that. I've left you exactly what our marriage was worth." The screen went black. Greta was shaking. "This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke. I don't care what he said on a video. The law is the law. I am the spouse." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Actually, Greta, that brings us to the most important part of the new filing. Arthur didn't just change the beneficiaries. He triggered a very specific clause in your prenuptial agreement, a clause you likely forgot existed because it's rarely used in modern law." Greta's lead lawyer leaned forward. "What clause? My client has been a faithful spouse for 3 decades. Mr. Sterling pulled out a stack of bank statements and photographs. "Is that so? Because according to these records, Greta has been funneling money into a private offshore account for the last 7 years, over $4 million to be exact. In this state, and under the terms of your specific prenup, that is defined as grand financial infidelity." Greta's jaw dropped. The room was silent. "Arthur knew," I whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine. He had known all along. "Because of this violation," Mr. Sterling continued, "the entire 2015 will is not just amended, it is completely bypassed. There is a legal term for what you are now in relation to this estate, Greta." Greta was hyperventilating. "What? What are you talking about?" Mr. Sterling looked her dead in the eye. "Ineligible." The word hung in the air like a guillotine. "You are ineligible to inherit a single cent from the Vance estate. Not the house, not the cars, not the business, and certainly not the trust funds." Greta screamed. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "You can't do this. I built that life. I am the queen of that house." "Actually," Mr. Sterling said, handing me a golden key from the folder, "Sarah is the owner of that house, and the business, and the accounts. Everything has been placed into a primary trust with Sarah as the sole executor and beneficiary." The next hour was a blur of beautiful, poetic justice. Greta's lawyers realized within minutes that the paperwork was airtight. Arthur had spent months working with the best forensic accountants in the country to document Greta's theft. By stealing that $4 million over the years, she had triggered the clause that lost her the $40 million estate. She had traded a fortune for a few million in the shadows. We all walked out of the office. Greta was waiting for me by the elevators, her face twisted with hate. "You think you won?" she hissed. "I'll tie this up in court for years. I'll make sure you never see a penny of that money." "Actually, Greta," I said, feeling a strength I didn't know I had, "Mr. Sterling just informed me that since you've been ineligible since the moment Arthur died, every penny you've spent from the estate accounts in the last 2 weeks is technically unauthorized conversion. In simple terms, it's theft." I stepped closer to her. I have the keys to the estate back. I've already called the security team. They are currently packing your designer furs and your Italian shoes into trash bags. They'll be waiting for you on the sidewalk. Greta's eyes went wide. You wouldn't. You did it to me in the rain, I reminded her. But don't worry, I'm not as cruel as you. I'll give you the name of that motel I stayed at last night. It's cheap, though I don't think they serve champagne. I didn't waste a second. I drove straight back to the estate, my estate. When I arrived, the moving truck Greta had hired for her new furniture was still there. I told the driver to take it all back. I didn't want a single thing in that house that Greta had picked out. I walked into the library, Arthur's favorite room. It smelled like old books and the faint scent of his pipe tobacco. I sat in his chair, and finally, for the first time in years, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I felt seen. The next day, Greta tried to break back in. She showed up with the locksmith, claiming she had forgotten her jewelry. I didn't even go to the door. I let the security team handle it. She was escorted off the property in handcuffs for trespassing. The local news caught a glimpse of it, the socialite of the year being put into the back of a squad car in her silk dress. It turned out the ineligible clause was just the beginning. Because she had stolen money from the business accounts, the IRS was now looking into her. She had to use almost all of her shadow money just to pay for legal fees and back taxes. She went from a penthouse in Paris to a 2-bedroom apartment above a noisy laundromat. People ask me what I did with all that money. I didn't buy a yacht. I didn't go to Milan. I turned the east wing of the estate, the place Greta wanted to turn into a closet, into a free hospice care center for families who couldn't afford end-of-life care. I named it Arthur's house. I realized that Arthur didn't give me the money to make me rich. He gave it to me because he knew I would use it to do what Greta never could, care for people. Greta still sends me letters sometimes, demanding her share. I don't read them. I don't need to. Justice isn't always about getting even. Sometimes justice is just about the truth coming to light. Greta thought she could steal an inheritance, but she forgot that the most valuable thing Arthur had wasn't in a bank account. It was the love and loyalty of the people she treated like dirt. She lost everything because she couldn't understand that one simple truth. And as for the lawyer's one word, ineligible, it didn't just describe her legal status, it described her heart. If there's one thing I learned from Arthur, it's that you should never underestimate the person who stays quiet while they're being mistreated. They aren't weak, they're just waiting for the right moment. Greed might win the sprint, but integrity always wins the marathon. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have let Greta stay in the guest house, or would you have sent her to the motel like I did? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story of justice, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Until next time, remember, the truth always finds a way out.